Hello.
Hi folks. I managed to lose the picture because I was trying to move it to a different window and I should have known rather than to stress my brain today. So can you see me?
Yes.
Yep.
I've lost, there's the app. I just found it again. Hi Yuma, Yumna. The reason I'm so stupid is I have, apart from the usual reasons, is I have COVID. So I shouldn't try to do anything that is unusual.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh, well, could be worse.
Oh, I know a ton of people who now have the latest strain of COVID, and it's, yeah, not fun. I hope you feel better.
Thank you, but the problem is my webcam is in a different screen and I can't figure out on this. I know how I know how it should work, but it isn't working. So just excuse me, I'm going to have a funny angle to my face.
Not a problem.
Could move this over to the side.
All right, well, we can probably start off with the data that was provided by Alexandra. Do you want to just kick that off?
Sure.
And just as a refresher from last meeting, just because Matt was out as well, we came up with the hourly amount of $25 per hour for the portion of it. That basically was from the Office of Equity recommendation. So just kind of a brief overview of that. Now we're kind of moving forward with the low income stipend and how to kind of approach that. Where did it start? And yeah, finalizing that part of it. So yeah, take it away.
Yeah. So as we saw from a lot of the other cities that have had this question come up in their salary commissions, they've used the HUD income and rent limits as kind of a data point for determining whether or not to do some kind of a stipend based on income. And so as a result of the commission's request at the last meeting, I've provided data from both HUD and then ARCH being the affordable housing kind of coalition for King County in this area. So they obviously use that HUD data, and I provided two different charts. One was just the data directly from HUD, and it includes both the 2024 area median family income, and then it breaks down the 50%, which they consider very low income, and then 80%, which is considered low income. And it's interesting to note that they consider King and Snohomish County to be the same. So I know that was a question last time was, well, can we get the data for Snohomish County? And they do not consider that different. So that simplifies things a bit. So so the second page that you see from ARCH kind of provides a lot more data. There kind of provides the percentage of area median family income at all levels, starting at 100%, going down to 30%. So they consider the kind of the average median income to be 147,400. That's for a household size of 4. So that includes children or anybody living in a household that is related or family in some way. Then it breaks it down from there. So there's a lot of numbers to think about. If you're considering some sort of stipend, it would be, what do we base that number on? Is it based on a certain household size? Is it based on a per person amount? At what percentage level do we consider that? Like I said, 80% HUD considers low income, 50% HUD considers very low income, and then there's varying degrees within that. So so that's the data that I've provided for you, and I'm happy to answer any questions or help think through that.
Do you have questions? Anyone has questions?
Thank you for providing that. I think I need just a couple minutes to review these documents.
Could someone remind me what was the cut that Kirkland and one other city did? Lauren, you made us come up. We looked at it. We put it on the, and we came up and we figured we had some tentative agreement.
Yeah, so we had tentatively agreed. I'll just start with the salary increase. The tentative agreement was to raise it to $20.30 a month for the mayor, $1,900 a month for deputy, $1,730 a month for council. And then when we were discussing the, and those are kind of tentatively locked in. And then the stipend that we were discussing was kind of twofold of, do we do steps? And we kind of agreed rather not. Don't find a reason to do a stepped approach right now. And the second question was what amount we were looking between Issaquah, Kirkland, and Edmonds, and that range is $350 to $500 a month. And so we were considering what to set the stipend at, but we had tentatively agreed to do the 80% of whatever metric, insert metric here, of the area median income. So that would be HUD. So the 80% of those HUD numbers that Alexandra presented. So I also did some math on what would be total paid out to council, deputy, and mayor if they've claimed like the full low income stipend for either 400 or 500. So I have those numbers, but at least that's where we're at for now, to kind of consider and look at the HUD data and what that means for us.
So our goal today is to hone in on justifying how much of a low income stipend we're providing. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh no, I had just a quick question. The 350 to 500, remind me, I couldn't find my notes. I had guests for like the past week and everything is like all over the place. But I think Edmonds was 400, right?
Edmonds is 500. Issaquah was 350, and then Kirkland had a stepped approach, but they're like 80% or under was 400.
Okay.
Yeah, and Edmonds is the closest to the like salary increase that we've done.
Yeah.
It's very similar to the salary increase that they did. And they used Snohomish County data for theirs. They didn't like report it. They didn't break it down necessarily. So I can't say that the numbers are exactly the same, but if we're treating King and Snohomish as kind of this bundled, then I think that's still a fairly representative comparison. The thing to keep in mind with Edmonds as well is that I do believe that they are a strong mayor.
Yeah.
So I'm double checking. There's no low income stipend for the mayor because they have big salaries.
Excuse me, folks, I'm getting a lot of feedback. Yes, could we maybe mute ourselves if we're not talking?
Yes.
It was probably me. I hear my kids like playing outside the door, so I will go on mute.
So let's talk about the number. How do we decide we don't have a lot, it's not a huge range. And then we can talk about 80, whether we stick with the 80%. Lauren, do you want to, you are the one who nicely summarized and presented the data. Do you want to make a proposal?
I'm not 100% sure on this because they are very close. And because of that, I don't want to make my decision necessarily arbitrarily. I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion on one or the other, actually.
I'm of the opinion, kind of replaying our conversation from last time. I'm not sure that I want it. Like, when I came into this meeting, I was still unsure if we were doing step or not step. And my thought, I know that after you did the recap that we were leaning towards not doing this step. And what I'm trying to say is I'm still on that. I'm still in agreement that we shouldn't do a step. I think it's kind of like justifying how we were able to do the increase for the deputy mayor, and the council, which was the cross between like a contract job and a full-time job, where this is it could potentially be a one-time thing. I think the stepped approach it's like a cross between that, but I think for a stipend, it's just it's an easier benefit to understand if this is what it is. And so right now, in terms of just, because benefits are hard to understand, even for people who've been doing it forever. And for simplicity, I'm just in my head right now thinking, okay, I'm glad that we're not doing the stepped approach. It's not that difficult to understand the stepped approach, but for pure simplicity, like, hey, this is a stipend, here's what it is. I'm leaning towards that. Can someone remind me how Kirkland, Edmonds, and Issaquah came up with those numbers?
They, if I'm correct, they didn't write in their reports how they came up with like the amount, like the 350 amount. They write about the analysis they used. So it was King County or Snohomish County AMI, but they didn't specify how they chose that number. Now that I'm looking at the data right now, I'm actually leaning more towards the 500 number, because $500 a month, if they're qualified and eligible and claiming that benefit every single month on top of their salary, the mayor would be earning $30,360 per year. And the arch numbers for 30% of area median income for one person is just under 40,000, or sorry, 31,000 per year. So to me, if we went for the 500 number, then we are essentially providing the necessary salary to live for what could be considered the poorest in our community, that it wouldn't actually meet that 30%, but it at least is pushing us so that we're right there on the border of that. So that's making me lean a little bit closer to that. But again, that's the mayor. That's assuming that this person would only have one job, and this is still still not able to afford like a household income in this area. However, it is at least that bare minimum. So how are you feeling, Rosemary? Is there anything?
Well, I didn't have a rationale like that. I think that's a really interesting one. I like that. I was just thinking that because it's because it's a new concept for Bothell to have this, that we could be conservative, and I was just going to suggest 400 because we've got a rationale that other cities have done it around us, and this is sort of in the middle. Whether it's the median, it's not exactly. Actually, it is the median, I think. And our rationale is not the one you've been using. It's a more traditional kind of rationale for arguing about things. It's that this is the middle. But I'm actually flexible about this. So that was that would have been my rationale.
Do you want staff input on this, or do you want us to stay out of it? I have some thoughts.
I'm open to any input.
So first of all, I think all of your comments so far have been very reasonable and rational as far as whether you go the $500 amount or the $400 amount. And looking at these three cities, one of them sticks out to me as one that is really typically like Bothell in the sort of economic makeup and how they operate as a city, and that is the city of Issaquah. Even though they are, I believe, a strong mayor with the city administrator. They're used in a number of ways in comparisons to the city, where Kirkland is often bigger and Edmond is sort of further away in Snohomish County. We use the city of Issaquah a lot. The other thing that I would think about when you're thinking about a benefit like this is it's brand new. And unless you're offering typical benefits like medical, dental, vision, the truth is, when it comes to benefits, is you just don't know how they're going to be used. You just don't. Like you try to address a problem, and the problem you're trying to address here is that it's costly to run for office, and it is not accessible to people in our community. So what may be the best thing about what you're doing here is sending a message to people that that's not okay from the city of Bothell. We want this to be more accessible. We want there to be diversity in the income ranges that are on the city council. Whether or not someone actually takes the forward action of creating a public document to request this benefit and or stipend in a political environment, I don't know that that'll work. And we don't have anybody that's done it long enough to tell us whether or not it worked, it did anything in their city as well. And so to me, like the 350 to 400, 500 range that you're talking about makes sense, because Issaquah and Edmonds are economically more comparable to Bothell than Kirkland is, number one. Number two, you're kind of trying this out. Rosemary's right. Like, we don't know if this will work or not. But I suppose I could also play devil's advocate and say, well, if you want a stipend that's going to actually work and provide a benefit, then you might suggest you could go bigger. But I generally think the comments that Lauren and Rosemary have made so far are pretty rational as far as offering something new. And if it's used, then in 2 years you can analyze why it was used, and if it was used in other cities, and are other cities keeping it around, or are they doing something different, and you can address it. And that's a kind of a, with having a salary commission every 2 years now instead of 6 years, the decision you make today is really a 2-year decision. It's not something that can be reviewed and discussed again in an 18 month period or so. So just some thoughts. But
Thank you. That was helpful.
What Rosemary was saying is about 400. That's exactly how the city would think about it. if we had a new position and we were like, man, Issaquah's paying this and Kirkland's paying this and Woodville's paying this, we'd want to be somewhere in the middle, but maybe a little above the middle. Does that make sense? That's where we would generally what we would try to get.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And even as you're talking about it, it is a question. There could be consequences, you know, not dire, but consequences, political consequences, whatever, for somebody filing a public document to receive this credit. And I think that my immediate thought was what would incentivize somebody to do that? And I think that setting it 400 versus 350, that $50 may be enough. That, you know, $350 a month doesn't like maybe seem like much to somebody, so they may not want to go that step. But 400, I think, to your point, it is just that little bit above average, kind of like comparable, gives enough reason that we can justify believing that somebody would go through the process of applying for that benefit and utilizing it. Yeah, I think, you know, you're right. In the future, there would be other considerations. We would know how other cities have been able to implement it and how the process goes. So I agree with some of the logic shared.
I also agree with the 400 number. I think there's more justifications for the 400 mark number than there are for the 350 and the 500. Especially if we're looking at, hey, this is, like you said, this is the first time we're doing this, then 400 makes sense because, hey, Issaquah's at 350 and then Edmonds is at 500. Let's start off, but let's start off with just like a little bit above, as a more appealing benefit compared to other cities. It's like Issaquah, you said, is more like us. So the 350 makes sense, but then also, Lauren, I can understand why having an even larger number, but something that's not too high is, like you said, it incentivizes somebody to actually pull the trigger and file the document. Because the goal here is if we're offering the benefit, we want people to use the benefit. So, yeah. I'm gonna propose that we go with the 400 mark. I'm also looking at Edmonds being a strong mayor city, and we're not a strong mayor city. And so, if we're gonna stay comparable and do the traditional, justification of why are we offering this benefit and comparing it to others, I think that 400 mark makes more sense than the 500.
I think we agree on the 400. And now I need to talk briefly, I think, about the criteria to get this benefit, or have we figured that out?
I'm not sure I understood your question, Rosemary.
Well, it's that we had a conversation about it's 80%, but I'm not exactly sure what it's 80% of, and I think I just missed something in there. Because we were playing last time with a couple of different numbers. No, I shouldn't say that. A couple of different criteria, maybe I would say. I think Lauren helped my adult brain, so I'm going to let her talk.
Yeah, we were talking about the of 80% using the HUD area median income. And so I think the question with that is when we say 80%, and I think this is a question for y'all as like city staff, and like having read through these, is when we say 80%, and it's for a council member who has a family of 3, that would be 80% of a 3-person households area median income. Is that correct? That it would be dependent on like the household size and not just like an arbitrary, you have to hit 80% of the 3-person household median income, even if you're a 1-person household.
Yes, you could basically say that, and then that arch, that second attachment with the arch provides that matrix of what that would actual amount would be. And in your language, you probably need to qualify that, because that might be confusing if someone says, well, I'm just a household of 2, or I have a household of 8. You know, what does that mean to me? You probably need to qualify that. So again, that gets into, I know we kind of talked about that at one point, is there are administrative challenges associated with this. You know, not only someone filing a public document, but then on the back end is verifying the income. What does that mean? What kind of income? You know, is it something that's broad that could potentially be taken advantage of, or are you going to, you know, have necessarily qualifications on it? So I don't know, you know, offhand what these cities do to get around that administratively. But it probably would be important to clarify that if you're going to say this number applied to anybody. So.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. I think we would like to be as clear as possible. So I'm trying to think of what would be the best decision. I think the terms we've kind of been talking about so far are essentially 80% of the HUD AMI for like dependent on household size. And I don't know how to define income, but I would be happy to hear suggestions from anyone if y'all have thoughts on how we should define income or qualifications. I know there was some that we had talked about that was in the Office of Equity Community Compensation of how people verify.
That's what I was going to say, that document had some details about that. And I don't think the information from a couple of the cities that we looked at who did this actually in the salary their salary commission or their final recommendation actually included all that detail. I think that was going to be, I'm guessing that's what the lovely folks sitting around the big table in Bothell City Hall figure out. So city staff, do you need some time? Do you want / need some time to think about that part of it, or to help us, or to contact your colleagues in other cities?
I'm a little confused as to what it is we're trying to resolve here. So if I'm a council member, if I'm elected to the city council, I have a household income. And I apply for this, and if I am below 80% of whatever tool we use, I qualify. What's the issue we're trying to resolve with that? I mean, there will be some sort of internal proper process. We'll have some paperwork that'll meet the requirements of the commissions. What needs to be answered? Am I missing?
I believe the question of how do we determine what counts as income and how do we qualify eligibility are kind of the two questions that we've been tossing back and forth. And I think that how do we qualify eligibility was that kind of 80% of HUD AMI dependent on household size, which may need some more specification based on what other cities have done in their code. And then I think our question was transitioning to how do we determine what counts as income? And I think that the question actually along with that is, do we need to define these two questions as part of the salary commission? Or is that something that we're creating work for city staff to do based on our decisions?
I'm going to throw this out here with some understanding that we haven't really discussed this at length. My answer is no. I don't know that the salary commission would need to define that. My gut is we're going to take your policy direction and come up with a process, an internal procedure on how to implement it. We will probably define, man, I've never had that question be proposed. I'm surprised, but I mean, I imagine income would be as it is reported in federal taxes is what I would assume that we would use, but I guess I really don't know the answer to that. So I guess what we're asking is what is the justification? They're going to tell us what their income is what sort of legal justification. If you guys want to be involved in that, there's nothing stopping you. But if I think what I would suggest is we will come up with an internal standard operating procedure on how to implement that effectively. And my initial thought is that it's going to depend on what income is reported through federal taxes, as opposed to making us a
Yeah.
So here's the question. This is kind of policy question out there. Just because I am familiar with, some of the tax regulations and things like that, is if you do rely on an income, it does not prohibit somebody who is, say, independently wealthy or has a big share of savings or stock ownership or things like that from applying for that discount. Not saying that they would or anything like that, but that is, can be kind of the outpouring of some of those sorts of things. So does that achieve your purpose? Is that something that we're, as Matt said, it is symbolic. It's just saying, if you're saying we're offering a low income stipend because we want a broader share of the community to be able to participate, but if the practical outpouring of that is that somebody who says, well, sure, I have a low income because I'm independently wealthy and have a huge pile of savings, that doesn't technically qualify for income under tax laws. Again, that's a very specific situation, but those are the kinds of things that somebody who is applying would ask and saying, well, my income does look low, but I actually have independent sources to help me run for council and to help fund a campaign. So anyway, those are some of the nagging questions that come into my head about the actual outworking of that type of program. Again, maybe the other cities have dealt with that. Maybe, again, it's more of a symbolic thing saying, we want a broader share of the community, but that's kind of some of the practical outworkings.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
It's, it's a specific example,
yeah.
But could that happen? And then somebody comes back and says, well, this guy over here applied, or he says he's low income, but we know that he's not,
Yeah.
Anyway, it might be one of those things that, you do have the benefit of reevaluating in 2 years and saying, oh, this didn't quite get the results that we wanted. Maybe we need to look at something different.
So maybe I could suggest this to move forward. What I think is important is that you have an understanding of that this will not be used in a way that is not as you intended when you finally approve a policy. So what I would propose is that we, number one, schedule a public hearing and come back with the resolution that does the two things that you asked. Meaning, it's not, you haven't done anything with it, you haven't voted on it. It's just in resolution form. You give an opportunity for council members and the public to respond to that if they want to. And then also between now and then, we can have another agenda item that investigates this issue a little bit, and talk to Edmond and Kirkland, and Issaquah, and see how that they've thought about this issue, because that would be very embarrassing to the city if an internally wealthy individual who reports very little income decided to apply for a benefit that, quite frankly. And so the other thing that I think is important to this is that while we use a tool to determine what income is, so we're not coming up with that arbitrarily, that we have some sort of independent judgment to determine, you know, this isn't really what was the intent. So I would need to put my brain to that. But if you wanted, we could go ahead with the public hearing and get that part out of the way and talk about the two decisions that you made. And then as a follow-up, we'll tell you, you know, this is how we're going to address this income issue, and even show you some sort of standard operating procedure or something. So you know your policy is going to be implemented in a way that's intended. And if we do our job, you can vote to approve the resolution, or if the public or council provide you feedback that you weren't aware of, you can vote not to. You can vote to do nothing and keep going down the road of discussing the matter. Having the public hearing doesn't bind you to any sort of decision. Does that make sense?
I think that makes good sense. It's just, I think, important that as we figure out how not to let the selfish rich person fantasy that we have, or reality that we have, that doing that if you got caught will probably mean you wouldn't ever get elected again. So I think it's, and given this person lives in the community, so what I'm just saying is I think we need to be careful, but we shouldn't go overboard with our carefulness. That's all I'm trying to say. Because you don't want to put up so many hurdles that the people who really need it have to struggle with it. So I mean, I'm sure you know that, but that was just my only thought. That it seems a low probability. It's only, you know, it's not a lot of money a year. And if you got caught, it would be embarrassing for the city, but it also would be embarrassing for the person.
Yeah.
I think I went back through the community compensation guidelines, and one thing that I'd like us to consider as we mull over this is something that the legislature has begun implementing with a few other programs, is using public assistance as verification, and that essentially, if you're qualified for public assistance, it just categorically makes you eligible for a low income stipend, just automatically kind of puts you in a low income bucket, if you will.
Well, wait a second. Does this Washington State Commission, do they have a low income stipend?
The Office of Equity?
Yeah. Didn't they propose for state volunteers, and so how do they determine income?
They just provide.
Yeah. So their verifications, they not for compensation, someone who does not have lived in. It just lists current examples. It says agencies should determine which forms of income verifications they will use. It just says you should determine, but their examples are that categorical eligibility, pay stubs from the last 1 to 3 months, W-2, previous year's tax return, employer statement, or self-attestation. So those are examples that currently exist, but the Office of Equity doesn't give a definitive answer of what you should use or what would be most equitable to use either. The categorical eligibility is just something that I have seen, that I think that the Washington College grant is soon to implement, as in if you're already on public assistance, you will become eligible for the state grant.
So it does not appear that they're using any sort of like the HUD or KCMI at all. Is that accurate?
Are they using the federal low income? Like 400% of, like no more than 400% of the federal poverty level, adjusted for household size. And if that's the case, I was going to propose that we use that as our, like instead of the 80% or the 50%, because I meant to actually go flip it back and forth and check what was 80% of the HUD low income. But I think it was like 30,000 something for one person, for one household, whereas the federal poverty level for one was 14,580 for a household of one, and it goes up to 30,000 for a household of four. So the threshold here is much lower.
It's much lower because it's not generalized to our specific area.
Yeah.
The area is the cost too.
Yeah. So it lowers the barrier, but then it could potentially make people eligible that, not going to say this on public record, but may not have otherwise been eligible. I'm not using the should word, but you understand what I'm saying.
I was going to say I like the suggestion that we have the public hearing. Matthew's suggested we have the public hearing because it will give the staff a little time to ponder this. You know, we're all trying that because I think the commission has made the policy decision of what we want to do. There's some details about how to implement it, which were not included in some of the other documents we've seen, which is why we're struggling a bit. So I would like to give them I'd like to follow through. I don't know whether the two of you would, to go ahead with Matthew's proposal that we have the public hearing, which in the last 2 times I've been on this commission, nobody showed up to, which was quite nice. And give them some time to get their head around this, because does that make some sense? So do the staff, do you need anything else from us now?
Well, I guess I just want verification that what you are proposing to do is to provide a stipend of $400 a month for households that are below 80% of 80% of what?
HUD.
Yeah. And so what we need to come back to you is some method of how are we going to verify what people's income are? Similar to what the Office of Ethics is proposing on page 19 of their, like, how are we going to approach that? I got to tell you from a city management experience, what the fear is going to be is staff is going to be between an elected official who feels like they qualify for this benefit. We're going to want to make it as clear as possible how this happens. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. We don't want you put in that difficult situation.
Yeah. The self-attestation part of it is a legal document. I mean, so this person would have to be, I mean, they have to attest legally that they are.
Yeah. Well,
I'm going to I'm going to engage the city attorney's office on this issue.
Yeah, and as I said, you might you might reject that particular part, but we can go ahead. I think it sounds like because we've got the standard salary, and then we figured out what the stipend is, and we figured out the big picture of what the criteria for the stipend is. We need some details about how to make that work, or that
Got it.
apply. That's the word I'm looking for. So,
Okay.
and we hope we're not giving you too much work to do. And I do hope you find a way of making it simple so that you don't have whining council members or mayors or deputy mayors all over you.
Yeah, you're okay. I think I'm going to have an attorney do the work. So
That's even better. You just pass it on to somebody else. That's better.
No, it's okay.
I do want to ask one more thing. So currently, the council members do get deferred compensation. Do you want to continue that? I don't know if that's appropriate to ask here.
Oh, I thought that was assumed. I didn't know we were.
Oh, okay. I just
Yeah.
formally asked.
So they can currently, you do want them to continue to be able to contribute or take part in a deferred compensation plan?
I don't see why not. Is there some reason why not?
No.
Okay.
No. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to try to get you some documents earlier than usual, so you have some time to hem and haw about them. Again, just because I'm giving you a resolution, at the next meeting, you can say, I don't like the way this is worded. I don't like the way that's worded. We can, so don't feel like anything's etched in stone. Until you say, this is what we're doing, we can adapt and amend and do all sorts of things.
Do we need to set the date for the public hearing, or is it just 2 weeks from today? So what are we doing about the date?
We can do the 2 weeks.
I was assuming that it would be 2 weeks from today, but I would want to know if that worked for the three of you or not.
Is it possible for us to do it on the 24th? So just one day before, which is a Wednesday.
I think that's it.
What day are you on vacation?
Thursday.
I would not be able to do the Wednesday.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
I was suggesting the Wednesday before, which would be the 24th. Lauren said she cannot do that day. I am available on the 25th. It would be a preferred not to. So it's not a hard, like I can make it work.
I'm happy to do another date that isn't the 25th. I just can't do the evening of the 24th specifically. But if the 23rd, 22nd, the 26th, any day that week.
How about Thursday?
I'm going.
The other reason we can't go before, so we can't move the date earlier. And the reason we can't is we have to give a certain amount of public notice for a public hearing, which I believe the deadline is tomorrow. So we can go after. So what about any time after Thursday the 25th? Like potentially Thursday the 1st.
I actually would prefer the 25th over any day that week after. So let's keep it the 25th.
Is this the best time?
For me?
Yeah.
Yeah, the 25th is the best time if we're going to look compared to afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, look for some emails earlier from us than usual. I would hope we would give you as much as a week. I don't know if we can give you a full week, but we will try. If you have any questions before that, I reach out to Hay would probably be best, and we can get you answer.
So I said this at the beginning, but I want to say it again. I want to thank the staff. We've asked you for a lot of things, and you've been really patient with them, and we've talked endlessly, and you've been really patient with us, and I want to thank you for all the work you've done.
Well, let's get the decision made before but because there could, as we know, Rosemary, some things could happen between now and then.
I didn't thank you for the success. I thanked you for this.
But I do want to say, I think this is, I didn't know how this was going to go this year because of how things have gone in other cities recently. And I thought this was a very reasonable discussion, and that the commission moved in a progressive direction, but in a manner that is thoughtful of the city and the community. And I think this conversation has been very worthwhile. And I think you've all done a really good job. And I look forward to seeing if we can get a final decision on the 25th.
Thank you, and we look forward to the emails because we love emails.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, commission members.
Thank you. Bye.